Woo! Okay, girl, calm down. Hi, folks! It's me, Michaela, and welcome back to my channel. It is getting very, very close to being the end of the year. When did that happen? None of us know. But what is exciting about the end of the year is the end of the year book recap, review, analysis, summary, all of that jazz. And today I have a very lovely stack of books that I will be talking about as my favorite reads of 2024. Now, there is still a bit of time left to December. However, I don't have any 5-star prediction reads planned for the remainder of the year, so hopefully this doesn't change. If it does, I guess you'll just see a little clip of me pop in to add some additional amazing book that I read. But I believe this will be my best books of 2024. Now, what I made is a list of just every book I gave 5 stars this year, and I ended up with 12, which is I don't know, seems like a wonderful number. One per month is a pretty good 5-star ratio, I feel. And I'm just gonna talk to you about all of the books I gave 5 stars this year, which obviously would make them my favorite reads of 2024. And I've just made this list literally in the order I read them this year. So this is not this was the number one my favorite book. This was my least favorite of my favorite books. They're not tiered. They're not by rank at all. This is literally just based off of when I read them. Number 1 is the first 5-star read of the year. Number 12 is my last 5-star read of this year. And I like to keep it that way because I just like to enjoy books and I don't really want to think too hard about comparing all of my books to each other. I like to try and read from a number of genres, and I'm always, working to broaden my reading more, that it doesn't really feel fair for me to judge my favorite rom-com-y romance with my favorite high fantasy with my favorite general fiction, and then judge all of those against a classic novel I read and loved. None of that really makes sense to me, so I just don't do it. Fun how that works. I feel like I've talked enough about all of the little details of this list, but let's just talk about the list, shall we? The first 5-star read I had this year was actually the first book I read this year, and it's insane to think about the fact that I read this book this year. For some reason I put this book all the way over here, okay, and that was A Dangerous Collaboration by Deanna Raybourn. This is the 4th book in the Veronica Speedwell cozy mystery series. It is, what is this? Is this the 1880s? 1888. Ooh, that was a good memory by me. So this book is taking place in 1888, but it's historic, cozy mystery, and there's also a bit of romance, and there's so much slow burn romance banter in this series, and this was my favorite one yet. You're following Veronica, and she is a very independent woman. The first book, A Curious Beginning, she kind of ends up in this situation where suddenly there's murder around her and there's a lot of mystery going on, and Stoker, who she kind of ends up happening to be paired with on her adventure, they become this fun little scientist banter mystery solving pair, and it's just really fun. It's really great. I have so many more books in this series to read. I think there's 10 books in it now. I've only read 4, and I keep meaning to pick up the next book and continue reading the series, and then I just don't, because apparently I don't like myself or something. I don't know why I don't read books I think I'm going to love, but this one was absolutely amazing. My favorite book in the series that I've read so far. Ugh, God, Okay, my arms are too short for this. My next 5-star read of the year was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid writing. Now, this is only my second book that I've read of hers. I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo last year, I guess, at this point. And I really loved that book. And then I got Daisy Jones and the Six. I believe this was like one of my Christmas or birthday presents last year. Very worthy present because I loved it. This is a like historical fiction book that's taking place in like the 60s and 70s following Daisy Jones and the Six, which is like a rock band. And it is telling kind of the story of how they got together. They kind of became this huge music sensation, and then how the group ended up falling apart. And it's all told through interviews. So the entire book is dialogue, and it tells you like the different people telling the stories, and of course like each person, their story is like a different perspective of the same events, and you kind of get to learn like the relationships and the tensions and everything that was happening, the thoughts of people behind the scenes for all of these events. But the fun thing is that like the interview styles is not like, here's the interview with Daisy and then it just like is her interview. It'll be like all of the interviews of the people. It's like taking lines from each one to make a chronological story. So you're jumping back and forth between the lines of all of the characters to give you the story of Daisy Jones and the Six. And the thing is that like Taylor Jenkins Reid is able to write these like historical fiction characters that are so in depth that you like forget that this is fake. You really will forget that this isn't a real band making real music and that you cannot listen to them. You will forget it, and that is amazing. This is very like sex, drugs, rock and roll, drama. It's kind of like also giving like Netflix documentary vibes in a way. It's really good and it reads super quick. Next 5-star read of the year was Portrait of a Scotsman by Evie Dunmore. This is her third book in the League of Extraordinary Women. This is another historical book. I was like really loving historical based reads at the beginning of the year. But this is also like 1880s time period that is taking place. And this is obviously like a historical romance series. This is the one following Hattie and Lucien, and it's just really fun. It's kind of like a little enemies to lovery. They don't like each other, but then they're kind of like forced into being together, and then it's like forced proximity because they like go to Scotland. It's just a really good time. At the beginning of this year, I actually like started reading Portrait of a Scotsman. I believe I started reading this book and then was like, you know what? I forgot how fun like this series is. And I went back and I like reread the first 2 books and then read this book. And then I read the 4th book fairly soon after reading Portrait of a Scotsman too. But the thing is that Gentleman's Gambit, I just wasn't a fan of. It was kind of a disappointing read to me, which was sad because that the 4th book is the last book in the series. But the 3rd book, this one was my favorite and I loved it. I think like maybe if I was going to reread it right now, I might not give it 5 stars just because recently I have been trying to like rate my books a little more harshly and not give 5 stars out as willy-nilly. But in the moment, I read this book and I felt it was a 5-star and I gave it a 5-star. And I would still say it's a very fun book. It's a very good book. If you're looking for like a very feminist, suffragist, historical romance, fun series, you know, very rom-com-y vibes, maybe consider this series. I personally like it. The first book is, what is the first book called? Hold on. Bringing Down the Duke. I was going to say The Duke and I. It's like, no, that is Bridgerton. Is The Duke and I Bridgerton? Yes. Bringing Down the Duke, anyway, is Evie Dunmore, the first book. And I have to say, I do like it. I'm a fan. Okay, hi. I'm jumping in here in like almost the exact, like I look almost the same, but all my books are gone because I finished filming this video and Okay, can the fire truck not go down the road right now? Like, I'm trying to make an announcement. I finished filming this video and then realized that I forgot to talk about the 5-star books that I read digitally. I was so engrossed with my lovely stack of books that I forgot that there were 2 books that I read digitally this year that I gave 5 stars. And like, girl, why did I make a list if I wasn't going to be referring to it? But anyway, I'm going to quickly talk about those here. So I read Mislaid in Parts Half Known by Seanan McGuire, which was the 9th book in her Wayward Children series, and I adore this series. It's so good. It is a series of portal fantasy novellas. You are at Eleanor West's home for wayward children, and basically all of the kids at the school, the home, have found a magical door that brought them to a world, have ended up back in our world, and is now at Eleanor's home in order to cope with that, because like these magical portal doors that they find and go through is kind of like the perfect world for each individual child, and every single world is different. Each book kind of follows the story of different children. Some are like the backstories of the children in their worlds, and some are like an ongoing storyline at Eleanor West's home for wayward children, and like kind of a ongoing group of children mission kind of storyline. And they're all novellas, so it's all pretty short. And it's such a good story. I think I've given so many books in this series 5 stars, and I loved this one yet again. My next 5-star read of the year was Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This is the 3rd book in the Dreamland Billionaires series, and this was my favorite in the series. It's the final one, and it's between Cal and Alana, and this is like a second chance romance, which I think this was the first second chance romance I had read, but I really enjoyed it. And I think Lauren Asher did a really good job of like making her characters very like thorough and real in this book. I felt like in the other 2 Dreamland Billionaire books, I liked them, and I did like when I say I liked them, I think I gave them like a 3 and a 4 star or something like that. They're like fun reads, fun little romances. I had a good time. They read quickly, but like this one really felt like it was a bit above the other 2 in terms of like character depth, which I really enjoyed. I think like, again, if I was to reread this right now, would I give it 5 stars? I'm not sure, but that's also because in 2024 I entered my romance era, so I was like reading romance, and a lot of the romance I was experiencing was like brand new to me. I hadn't read things like this before, and so I was just like really liking everything I was picking up, because I was finding myself suddenly being like drawn to romance for like the first time in my life. It was a fun time, but I liked this book. I would say like just like another thing about my ratings is that I give ratings to books as to like how they came to meet my expectations for them, if that makes sense. So like when I pick up a Lauren Asher Dreamland Billionaire book, I'm not expecting it to be the most amazing highbrow literature writing ever. It's going to change my life. I'm expecting it to be a fun romance book. And so like if it's a fun romance book for me, then it gets 5 stars, because that's what I wanted it to be, which is again why I don't compare books in different genres to each other in terms of rating and like favoritism, because like just the way my brain works, that don't work. But this is like I think they're in like a vacation home this time. It's kind of like small town kind of vibes, if I remember correctly. I read this a long time ago at this point, but I had a good time with it. I liked. My next 5-star read was Murder in the Family by Cara Hunter, and this was such a good book. I actually made my first, well, I guess not my first really long video, because technically I guess my Red Queen series video is like my first really long video, but this is like the first long video I made that I was like kind of proud of, was my trying to solve a murder mystery video I made in March. If you have seen the like abundance of sticky notes and string on a wall behind me in some of my other videos, that would be my murder board that I made while trying to solve this murder. And it was so fun. So this book is basically 20 years prior to the time period of this book. Luke Ryder was like murdered on the steps of his home, and Guy, his 10-year-old stepson, was upstairs asleep when it happened. And so now 20 years later, Guy is like helping to produce this true crime series where they get a bunch of experts in and they all try to solve the mystery of Luke's death. And things get absolutely wild. This is such a good book. It's a lot of multimedia. It's like written as the transcript of each episode of the show, and then you also get text messages between characters and emails and posts on like social media accounts and things. You see like newspaper articles. It's really fun, and again, it like reads really quick. I really like the episode format because it felt like, I don't know, it really did feel like a true crime show, but it's all fiction, so it's like true crime but with none of the guilt because it's fiction. You see that? Fun. Highly would recommend. Also, if you want to watch my solving a murder mystery video, I will have it linked for you. I then, of course, guys, the next few are still romances because like midway through 2024, I was like reading only romance almost. Like I just dived headfirst into romance. It was almost like too much to the point where I almost like burned out. I didn't burn out. I caught myself before burning out on romance, but I got to a point where I was like, girl, you gotta start reading something other than romance, even if you're having a good time, because like this can't go on forever. However, at the time, I was having a great time, and one of the books I was having a great time with was Heartless by Elsie Silver. What a transition, what a segue. So this is her second book in Chestnut Springs, and this is following Cade and Willa? Is it Willa? It is Willa. Okay, I was like, couldn't remember if it's Willa or Willow, but it's Willa. And this is kind of like grumpy sunshine, single dad, cowboy. I feel like that should be enough for you to know. But I just really liked this book. I thought the way their relationship developed was really fun. And I think that, I don't know, I just like read it really quick and I had a really good time with it. I really like Elsie Silver's writing. I also kind of like the ranch cowboy element just because I like to read books where it's like experiences I have no experience of. You know, like I have never been to a ranch. I do not ride horses. I do not wear cowboy hats and the like, you know? So like this is like fun. This was fun. I like it. I actually read 3 books in Chestnut Springs and then realized that Gold Rush Ranch is kind of like a connected universe series for this. Like the characters, they like cross over. There's like some characters in both series, and Gold Rush Ranch was written before Chestnut Springs, so then I paused Chestnut Springs to go start reading Gold Rush Ranch, which I have been reading and I have been enjoying. But I still think this was probably like my favorite book of Elsie Silver's that I've read so far. I then have, this is like one of the few new releases I actually read this year, and that is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I believe this actually won the romance category for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I'm not surprised. This is such a good book. I really loved this book. It was so fun. Like the premise and the setup for this book is absolutely amazing, and I think it's so funny. I really like the humor in it, and I like the romance. It was like, I read it really quick. It's funny. It made me laugh, and it made me love, you know, rom-com vibes all the way. So good. This is between Daphne and Miles, and basically at the start of the book you find out that they're living together not out of choice, but because both of their partners, Daphne's fiance and Miles's girlfriend, had left both of them to run off with each other, and then Daphne needed somewhere to live, Miles needed a roommate, and now they're both heartbroken and living together, and like that's the start of the book. Like that's where we begin, and I feel like you can imagine where it goes from there. This also gives kind of small town vibes. I don't think they necessarily are in like a super small town, but it does kind of give that energy, and they're both trying to get over the relationship, fake dating kind of things are happening, and it just, you know, you ends up in those very like rom-com moments of like funny scenes, and it was just good. I really loved it. Emily Henry, I really like her writing style. I really like her characters. I really like the whole setup that she does for her stories. I've only read 2 of them now. I've read Beach Read and I've read Funny Story, but I've really enjoyed both, and I definitely will be reading more Emily Henry. I have a lot to catch up on. Not too many, I guess, but there's quite a few that I can still read. It's nice to have the option of like at least 3 more Emily Henry books to read, you know? It's like I need that. I then also have This Summer Will Be Different by Carley Fortune. I actually read this in the same reading vlog as I read Funny Story, so I'll link that if you want to know more of my thoughts, since, you know, at this point I kind of read both of these quite a while ago, so the details are no longer up in the noggin, but I remember that I loved them. I adored this book. This like might be like, if I had to pick a favorite romance of the year, I'd probably pick this as my favorite romance of the year for sure. Favorite book of the whole year, like again I said, I feel like I can't make that decision. But I will say this is my favorite romance of the year. So this is like vacation vibes. It's taking place on PEI, which I love PEI. It's like my family would always vacation in PEI, so like it was kind of fun to read a book based there. And you're following Lucy and Felix? Is it Felix? It is Felix. So Lucy goes to PEI with her best friend every year. And the first time she showed up, she had this one night stand with Felix. And then she finds out that Felix is her best friend's brother. And then she just continues their annual best friend trip to PEI. And her and Felix just can't stay away from each other. You know, it's so good. What I really loved about it is that as well as having this great relationship kind of developing between Felix and Lucy, there's also like such a strong storyline in the female friendship between Lucy and Bridget, which I really loved. That, you know, that was also like a really present part of the story and the character development. So like, great book, loved it, wonderful. I am a Carley Fortune fan. Okay, my next 5-star read is probably not a surprise to anybody, and you're probably shocked it's taking this long for Fredrik Backman to show up on the list, but Us Against You by Fredrik Backman. I read this for a reading vlog relatively recently, I guess, maybe like a month ago, where I was actually reading my TBR. This is the second book in his Beartown trilogy. It is flawless. Fredrik Backman's writing is so good. The way he can write stories that are like so serious but also so full of humor is like mind-blowing to me. It's like, how can you balance both of these so perfectly? And you're following all of these different characters. It's like very ensemble cast in this small town in the forest. It's a hockey town, and in the first book you're kind of following them as disaster strikes the town and is like pulling everybody apart. And so this is the second book continuing that, and it does such a good job of, you know, taking the events of the first book and showing you where they lead while also being a very full story by itself. It's not just like, and this is what happened next. It's very like, here's another story and how the previous book influence the events that occur in this one. And the way this left off, like, I need to pick up the winners, the third book in this, like yesterday at this point. Like, Fredrik Backman is my favorite writer, just putting it out there, favorite author. I need to read more of his books. It's like almost illegal that I claim he's my favorite author and I haven't read everything he's ever written yet. Like, what's wrong with me, you know? I know I'm going to love it. Why haven't I read it? I'm back. It is refilming Michaela to add in my digital reads, but I read Jade Legacy by Fonda, which is the third and final book in the Greenbone saga, and of course I also gave this 5 stars. This was an amazing book. The Greenbone saga is a urban fantasy series that is based in Asian culture, and jade is a magical substance and only certain people can use jade to have these magical powers. And the people who can use jade, they like run the whole country, and there are multiple clans, but 2 of them are the major clans. And in Jade City, the first book, tensions are like rising between the 2 clans, and as the series progresses, the world expands even farther, and it's very political. It's very like high fantasy, but it's also very urban fantasy. There's guns and cars and things, and it's just such a well written series. And Jade Legacy did such a great job of ending the series, which with something this expansive I think is extremely difficult to do, and Fonda did an absolutely amazing job with it. So Jade Legacy was my favorite in the series, but honestly, like, the series overall is 5 stars. I read all 3 this year and I loved all of them, but Jade Legacy was my favorite and was the one that I gave 5 stars to. There we go. Sorry, I got so excited about my stack of books that I forgot I read books digitally, but I remembered eventually and I filled in. Back to, you know, previous me filming the video the first time. And then we have the final 5-star read from 2024, and that is The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 3rd book in Era 2 of Mistborn, and this is very much like high fantasy meets mystery crime novel meets Western, okay? It's quite good. I loved it. And the thing about the third book in particular is that it's still a mystery. It's still a mission. You still have your kind of like ragtag team of people who don't really feel like they should be a team, but they are, and they're just so fun. There's a lot of humor. There's a lot of action-packed fight scenes and tension, but then there's also a huge amount of like world building and expansion in this book that like blew my mind. So that is why it's on the list. It was so good. And I cannot wait to pick up The Lost Metal, which is the fourth book in Era 2 of Mistborn. And then I don't know what I'm going to do, because I feel like, you know, I started reading Mistborn Era 1 with Brandon Sanderson, and then I was like, oh, I like Brandon Sanderson's writing. Let me finish reading the rest of Mistborn. And then I was like, well, what do I do now? And I was like, well, good news, girl. There's an Era 2. So I started picking up Era 2. And now that I'm almost on Era 2, it's like, where do I go from here? Like, what Brandon Sanderson should I pick up next? The questions. But would recommend. I have to say, like, I don't think you have to read Era 1 of Mistborn to read Era 2. However, you will understand Era 2 a lot better if you read Era 1 first, for kind of like the world building and the history that you will learn from the first era of Mistborn. And Era 1 of Mistborn is also so good. So it's like definitely worth the read before reading Era 2. Personal opinion. So those are all of the books that I gave 5 stars to this year. However, I do have a few bonus little like freebie adds to my list. These were all books I read for the first time this year, but I did also have some rereads that were 5 stars. So I didn't include them on this list because it's like, well, I reread them because I already knew they were like some of my favorite books, but I also feel like I should give them a little honorary mention. So that's what we're going to do now. The first is Fredrik Backman. I reread A Man Called Uva this year, so I could annotate it. I made a video of annotating my favorite book, and this is my favorite book. I loved this book, and I will continue to reread it over and over again every time I read it, which is like now only twice, but still. The second time I read it, I found different things that I loved in it, and I highlighted so many different passages. It is the story of like a grumpy old man who, after his wife dies, is really struggling with life, and then the community that ends up being built around him to support him during that time. You have to like go into it, I feel, knowing that like Uva is not a likable character very easily. He is kind of mean, he's grumpy, he's rude, but as you learn his history and you learn like all of the things and the events that have made him who and how he is, it's really like eye-opening, and I really loved it. I then also have Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I did a reread of this and gave it 5 stars before reading Us Against You. Like I said, this is the first book in that trilogy, so I just kind of told you what happened, so I don't feel like I need to tell you what the book is about, because I like just told you what the book is about. If you don't remember 2 minutes ago in the video, you can scroll back to like when I was talking about Us Against You and I tell you what Beartown is about. You can just like rewatch that right now. Great. Okay. And then the final 5-star read I had this year that was a reread was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This was my magnum opus video of the year, was making a video explaining the entire plot of Wuthering Heights. I am mildly obsessed with Wuthering Heights, and I reread it and was like, how did I not give this 5 stars the first time? Because it's so good. It's so good. It's absolutely insane. Like, I can tell you that it's the love story of Kathy and Heathcliff, and then like the events that happened between the two families throughout the years, but like that isn't telling you enough. Like the plot of this book is absolutely wild. Everybody sucks, nobody is nice, but the book is great. I will link my Wuthering Heights video if you want to hear me tell you everything that happens in this book. This is like actually a bind up of 3 Bronte sister books and not just Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights is not this big, but that is every book I gave 5 stars this year. Pretty good year, right? Like, that's quite a lot of 5 stars. I'm happy with it, considering I think like right now I'm at about like 55 books read for the year. So having, what is this? 12, 14 of them be 5 stars. Like, I'm very happy with that. So do let me know down below if you've read any of these books and if you loved them. Also, let me know what your favorite books of the year have been. If you like this video, make sure to give it a little like, give it a little thumbs up. If you happen to like me, consider subscribing. I'd be happy to have you. And with that, I hope you're having a wonderful day today, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.